What thing, if proven to be true, would have the biggest impact on the world and why? Story 1. That angels, demons, and aliens are the same thing, entities of higher density consciousness, and they have been around for thousands of years. They don't need a body or spacecrafts. They exist as pure mind and can manifest thoughts and ideas into reality. This level of consciousness is the next step for humanity. There are currently several races in our solar system from neighboring planets, even other places in our galaxy. Some entities don't want to infringe our free will. Some advocate for love and compassion, others for greed and self-interest. Some have tried to help us, and some have tried to enslave us. The Bible is about 50% genuine intention and 50% manipulation. The Old Testament is more negatively oriented. Jesus was a fourth density being who chose to reincarnate as a third density being to guide humanity. The UFOs we are currently seeing are remotely controlled weapons of mass destruction and are of the US government. They have many bases all over the world, including underwater. The technology is a continuation of Tesla's work. Think about it! Story 2. The existence of sentient aliens who travel to us. Not only does this prove life exists outside of us, it also proves that it is possible to get to that level, and the great filter doesn't wipe every sentient race out. It also proves that faster-than-light travel is possible and can be contained in the size of a ship. Story 3. Lots of people are rightfully so saying aliens, but what about the opposite of that? Proof that we are, have always been, and will always be alone in the universe. I think that would change so many people's perspective on a lot of things in their lives. We would know that we are in fact be the most special and fantastical things ever created by something or someone. I'm not religious, but I'd question if I should be. Story 4. If we figure out what makes us gay or straight, it's most likely going to lead to a complete eradication of homosexuality in the population. Religious communities will obviously want that switch off in their kids. Most parents will probably just default to the anti-gay. The only ones that might not would be the ever-shrinking queer population. Even then, I bet they'll pick straight kids too, unless they're just the absolute worst. Queer people in most societies suffer, even in civilized nations. What parent wants their child to live the rocky road they did when they're no longer 10% or whatever percentage of the population? They're 1%. Or less. We know we'll be able to do this eventually with genetic disease and physical characteristics, but wiping out an entire class of people? I feel like society is going to feel that one. Story 5. That's like looking for a needle in space. It could have been the smallest gesture that could have turned an event to the slightest degree off, affording a possible direction/outcome unimaginable. Research a fellow named Chamberlain, a simple school teacher, how the Civil War was radically changed due to his actions. Some say his actions alone helped the North win. The line was thin, no more ammo, wounded, there was no more backup. Even Abe, noticed, got word, tried to promote him. A simple schoolteacher did all that. He had zero military experience, he didn't want war. Story 6. Proof that we're truly in a simulation. Proof of alien life that's at least as advanced as us. Proof that the Big Bang was caused by some entity rather than just randomly. All would make our lives seem much, much less important on the grand scale of things, and really make people realize just how insignificant we are in ways we've never been able to before. Could possibly end all civilization as we know it depending on what it is. Story 7. Depending on the severity, the current restructuring of the Chinese Communist Party rule and its military. Many high-ranking staff, such as generals and admirals and such, due to rampant corruption and nepotism. Investigations have revealed that many of their missiles, of which China was believed to be the dominant world force when it came to missile potential, has been deemed wholly unprepared and mismanaged, with many of the missiles having their fuel stolen and replaced with water. Whilst this is happening, China is rapidly attempting to bail out their economy from a pending bust. If China turns out to be a paper tiger like Russia, not only does it debilitate the power of Xi on the world scale, but it essentially allows America to stand alone atop the world for the foreseeable decades with no significant military opposition. Many Asian countries have since strengthened their opposition against China, and the theorized invasion of Taiwan becomes increasingly unlikely, potentially impossible without a working missile force, more and more each day. Story 8. Aliens visiting Earth. I don't just mean alien life being detected far out in space, I mean aliens visiting Earth. It would have religious implications, God having created more than one type of man who is more advanced than we are. Economic implications. The aliens will no doubt have much superior technology to those that underpin our energy and technology sectors. Psychological implications. The idea that we can be intruded upon at will by a superior race and that the greatest heights of our culture, intelligence, priorities, and achievements might seem like baby talk to the visitors, and so on. If it were proven that aliens had been or were visiting us, then it would change damned near everything. Story 9. False vacuum. If there is a stable energy state below the lowest level we currently know of, it would literally change physics with absolutely unknowable repercussions. All life could end, or the planet could explode, or plenty of other very not good things. The thing about it is that it's pretty much impossible to prove it true without causing some region of spacetime to drop to that lower level. But the result would then propagate outward at the speed of light. You would only learn that it was true when the effects hit you. This could be happening right now, and it just started somewhere so far away that the result hasn't reached us yet. Story 10. My own personal conspiracy is that the internet is passé, and most of the toxicity we see around key issues comes from a limited number of high-volume troll farms. I think if you could just delete out of existence professional trolls online, not grumpy people with a bad day, but the folks that mass-produce bile, we would instantly have a kinder and gentler world. Get rid of troll farms and our self-perception of our peers and neighbors would transform overnight. Story 11. That nuclear fusion can be scaled down to the battery level. Imagine having a truly limitless supply of energy at the size of being able to put it in your house or in your bag. This would open up the door for things like cybernetics, mech suits. Cars would become obsolete. Personal air cars would be a thing because now the rate-to-fuel ratio would forever be solved. Clean water would easily become available for everyone because you could immediately stand up desalination plants basically anywhere with ocean access. Story 12, I know it wasn't. So please don't downvote me because I don't condone or agree with the claims made about it. But what if it was proven that the Sandy Hook shooting was staged? Everyone in the US would go crazy. No one would trust anything coming from the government. Alex Jones would immediately run for president and win, and he would inevitably end up starting a war with China, leading to World War II, and the world would never be the same again. Story 13, room temperature superconductors. Superconductors in general conduct electricity with little to no loss of energy from resistance, meaning that any machine with superconductor integration will be highly energy efficient. The problem is, superconducting properties are only possible when the superconducting material is cooled below a very low critical temperature, which is extremely costly, and something we have relatively limited options for. In theory, there exist superconducting materials that could achieve superconductivity at room temperature, hence the name room temperature superconductor, which would nullify the need for expensive and inefficient cooling systems. This removes a huge, and arguably the only, barrier to widespread commercial superconductor adoption, which could very realistically change the world overnight. A world where room temperature superconductors exist is a world where quantum computers are commercially viable and widespread, all forms of transportation are electric and highly efficient, and spacecraft propulsion is extremely cost-reduced and also equally efficient. Story 14, methane gun hypothesis if proven would be catastrophic. Idea being that methane, the worst of the greenhouse gases, gets trapped and freezes in extreme amounts in areas with year-round permafrost and on the seabed where pressure allows the methane to freeze. There are lots of unexplained extinction events throughout the geologic record, and the hypothesis goes that basically you hit some point where the planet warms just enough for the methane to start escaping the permafrost. This warms the planet more and more escapes. Eventually, this warms the ocean enough that the methane in the seabed starts to escape in large amounts, and the gun is triggered. Now a runaway reaction begins where the planet rapidly heats, and all trapped methane floods into the atmosphere. If it were somehow proven before it happened, then we'd have a hard line we can't cross, and a desperate need to cool the world and prevent the release of this methane. If was proven in the middle of happening, well, then that's just game over. We'd have a pretty clear-cut, end-of-the-world scenario where only a tiny fraction of humanity would survive. Story 15. The movie Another Earth had a pretty cool scenario. A planet that looks identical to Earth enters Earth's orbit, ignoring how that would affect gravity. They have trouble attempting to make contact with the other Earth, But when they do, it's televised live, and there is a NASA scientist on the radio. She states her name and gets back a response with the person on the other end stating their name, and their name is exactly the same as the NASA scientist. In fact, she's the same person, and they communicate with a copy of themselves. So basically, the other Earth is a copy of our Earth, and the other you is over there, probably doing and thinking the same thing you are right now. What would you say to the other Earth you if you met them? Story 16. I imagine if gods were proven to be real, it would have an impact. Like if them revealing themselves and, say, doing something beneficial to humanity in some manner that couldn't be explained in any way short of a miracle, or one showing people family members long since dead it being really them. I doubt it would make anyone one religion, since it's all gods, or even religious. Some might want to see if it's technology or a different species, and if it's the former, can humanity reach those levels? Story 17. I think the biggest impact would be to discover that there is a ruling elite shadow group, and the Republican Party is actually controlled by and full of evil-worshipping pedophiles who indulge in the worst depravities, such as human sacrifice, including children, forced cannibalism, rape, torture, and many other dark rituals to gain and retain wealth and power. It's probably true anyway, but having it proven to be true might actually allow meaningful change to take place not only in the US, but worldwide. Story 18. So there's this one glitch in Pokemon Emerald. To supersimplify, it basically involves finding the perfect Pokemon, putting them in the perfect places, and using them to execute game rewriting code in a way that is completely nonsensical. If we could prove this universe is a simulation, it would open the possibilities. Supernatural phenomena would instead be investigated as potential effects of glitches. We may find people who go around sticking their elbows in every water fountain in a certain order to try and execute a particular glitch. Story 19. With the way people split on research, science, religion, politics, truth, etc., I don't believe anything would ever really be accepted for impact. There will always be people arguing against it, attempting to shut it down or change it back. Clean energy would be wrought with concerns about health impacts. Not to mention, most energy companies are going to hate the idea of unlimited free energy. They will likely still find a way to charge an arm and a leg just to connect your house to the grid. Extremely fast and reliable internet connection anywhere in the world will be brought with those health risks as well. Both of these will have protesters outside the doors and people threatening to destroy it. Think of the jobless coal miners. Cures for every ailment will have similar concerns. Look at the COVID vaccine. Some people online still complain about existing cancer cures and treatments, claiming their parents died because of no treatment. Why should we have it? The world is full of hateful people with no desire for change and attempting to use that change to their advantage, be it for power, respect, fame, money, etc. Story 20. The existence of other life in the universe. Understanding that we are not alone and the relative size of the universe would make all our petty bullshit seem so stupid. Religion would immediately be obliterated, and that would end about 95% of all wars. It would bring peace to the Middle East, and the fear of the unknown would bond all the people of Earth. We would embrace science out of necessity, and finally achieve all that humans are meant to accomplish. I think we would move beyond he-material. Story 21. The idea that quantum interaction at a distance is representative of other dimensions. What would those dimensions mean? Are there limits or not? And does a new one start each time an event occurs that could have had an alternate outcome? Are we all spending our time spinning off dimensions constantly? Does this apply equally to all life forms or just those with conscious choice? How would we know? Is there an infinite number of other dimensions as a result? But equally, is this number increasing as there are more life forms added? Story 22. I think resolving P versus NP or free will would have big long-term effects. You can argue it has no effect, because the day laborer still has to get up the next day and work at McDonald's. But this is the kind of thing that tends to lead to massive societal changes over subsequent decades. Free will might be a little more obvious, but P versus NP would clarify the direction of a lot of research and help refine whole fields of math and computer science, which would probably play a role in what problems are even approached to begin with. Story 23. The divinities, including the Abrahamic God, and their pantheons from across history and the world are real. Some have had to wear different hats as cultures and traditions changed. But that's not even the kicker. They were from previous intelligent species that somehow, someway figured out their way into godhood, and they've been watching humanity slowly do the same. Except we keep on getting our clock reset because our method to godhood is through scientific principles, and the knowledge that would be built towards them kept on getting destroyed in so many wars or conflicts or straight sabotage. All I can honestly say here regarding the impact this would have is quite simply maximum chaos in academic, conspiracy, political, and religious circles. Like, for one example, as to how unhinged things could get. Can you imagine the pressure on all the poor archaeologists now that the general population believes that somewhere in the ancient past, a scholar wrote an equation that would give the world nuclear fusion faster, or that Emperor Qin was onto something with his mercury-based immortality elixir? All because, let's say, Uzume, Hermes, Loki, and Gabriel all showed up in the UN building one day and were like, "Hey, so humanity? We need to have a heart-to-heart here." Story 24. I think the much larger implication is that if there were no afterlife, then there would really be no concept of paradise or eternal damnation. Not to say the world would necessarily devolve into lawless hedonism, because most people actually don't believe in an afterlife anyway, but it would stop having the gravitas it does for many people, for good and for worse. On one hand, you don't have people blowing themselves up on street corners to get into heaven for jihad, but on the other hand, you also get people blowing themselves up on street corners because they don't care what happens after death. One particularly scary scenario that may keep you up at night would be things like pilot suicide. Pilots are known to have a whole bunch of problems working against them, and pilot suicide is probably one of the leading causes of crashes of commercial aircraft. They just decide one day that today's the day and fly the plane directly into a cliff. I'm sure if you knew you wouldn't be tortured for all eternity for killing 300 people on your way out, it would be less scary. One of the first sociologists, Emil Durkheim's magnum opus, was regarding something like this. He studied the relationship between religion and suicide, and found that Catholics kill themselves far more rarely than non-believers, but even Protestants as well. I don't think religion gaining support would be as pronounced or earth-shattering as the sudden realization there aren't consequences for doing really horrible things. I don't really believe in an afterlife, and I would never do horrible things, but I'm not all people.